All right, here we are in the basement of the shop. We just came around the corner here. It's got these secret doors underneath. I apologize if the road noise is distracting here, but you can see we have really made the most out of this space, storing all of the woodwork that we've been carefully grabbing off of the trim in the house. I denailed all of this trim, and the more that we've gone through it, no matter how careful they were, and the demo crew really has been pretty meticulous about being super careful and getting all of this off as best they possibly can. But it's 200-year-old wood with 200-year-old cut nails, and it's all very dry. And so it's impossible to, you get it off in one piece and that's great, and then you drive a nail out and that happens. So the more that we've looked at this, the more we realize that, particularly this flat stock, there's a couple of things going on with it that leads us to the conclusion that we should probably just remill something to match it, instead of trying to reuse this stuff. So number one, the damage, like I said, but also this is a very thick board. Kind of tough to see. I'm sorry about the focus here, but it's what's called a 4/4. Some of them are 4/4, some of them are 5/4 boards. And so that worked because the plaster was put on after all of the trim in the house was completed. So they'd hang the doors, they'd hang they'd do the window trim, they do all that trim, and then they'd apply the moldings to the outside of the trim, and then they'd go and hang the plaster and lath and do all that and run that plaster right up to this trim board. So half of that trim board was covered up or compensated for based on the thickness of that plaster and lath. So you really only saw less than half of the thickness. It looked like a thin board, and in reality it was very thick. Whereas this is a typical 3/4 inch board. You can see how thick that board is. So if we hung that on the outside of the plaster, we do things differently now, where you'd plaster the walls and do all that rough work, and then you'd come in and start hanging things. If we put a 5/4 board, or a 4/4 board for that matter, flush to the plaster, it would stick off the wall over an inch, and it would just be weird, particularly because all of that trim has, here's a good example of it. This part that isn't painted is where that molding, it gets applied to the outside, so it's actually twice that thick. The molding was 5/4 as well, and so it would be 2 inches off the wall there, and a little more than we're comfortable with. It wouldn't match what had been there, and that's really our goal. So I spent all this time denailing all this stuff. We're gonna use it, but it's not gonna go back into the house as serving the same purpose it did originally. I would like to make some built-ins and some cabinets, and I can reuse a lot of this stuff, really all of it I'm saving, and it'll go back into the house in some other purpose. The boards here, these wainscoting boards, are one board. It's just one wide board. Most of them are about 30 inches in width, so they are awesome, spectacular, and they came off without creating any additional damage. Those cracks were already in place that you're seeing there. So another project for me this winter is going to be to get through these boards and decide how I want to repair the repairs that need to happen, and I'll keep you up to date on how this is going. But they got all that off without incident, and that'll all be going back in place. Some of the exact sizes will change because, again, insulation and wall thicknesses are going to change a bit. So most of these will just get a tiny bit shorter. That'll allow us to clean up the ends and take out some nails and do the things that will make it feel a little more fresh when we reinstall. So I'm happy about that. You can see the mantles here. They're all going to get de-nailed, and I'm gonna go about that differently for these. You can see that there are still nails back here. Let me see if I can get one. There's a lot of them, but I think the shadows are not letting them show up on camera right now. That's too bad. You can see one right there. But they're all sticking out. If I drive them out, it's going to basically disassemble the mantle. That is not what I want to do. Additionally, if it'll do all kinds of damage as I drive them out. So I can't leave them there either, because this has got to get mounted flat and flush to plaster. So I'm leaning right now to be carefully basically cutting off all the nails on the back side of these mantles. So like with a Dremel tool or a cut-off tool and grinding them flush. After I kind of press all the boards, I can clamp the boards together, hold them tight together so I know it's not going to back off, and then go ahead and do that. And then when we nail them back in place, it'll just be kind of tacking them in position to be on the wall, almost like a decorative art piece, because that's essentially what role they're going to play. Those fireboxes of the fireplaces are not going to be open. Most of them were not open when we moved in, and many of them have already been bricked up by George and Millicent or Herb or somebody over the years. So, and we're going to try to make this place energy efficient, and 8 giant holes in the walls in the form of these fireplaces were kind of a deal breaker. So we got to close them up, and we'll treat them like they were when we moved in, with some wallpaper or some, just to match the walls around them, and let them just be beautiful for what they are, for the art that they are. We got all kinds of other boards in here as well. Most of these were, again, nice wide old pine boards that were out of the shelving of the butler's pantries. There were 2 of them. That's why there's a huge stack here. I got my eye on a lot of this for possible flooring, to patch in flooring as necessary, because it's, again, real clear, nice pine. Give it a light sanding, and this stuff would be spectacular again. Over here, hopefully we've got enough light over here. This is all that trim work. This trim, we are going to try to return to the house. So the flat stock, because of the thickness and the amount of work going into that, is not really worth it. The trim, on the other hand, we are going to try to bring back and just fill these holes with some putty, give them a light sanding and a light painting. Most of this trim was in exceptional condition anyway, from a paint perspective. It's not all globbed up, so it can be used and repaired quite easily. So we're going to use as much as we can. We've also contacted a local mill, PJ Courier, for those who are in the know locally, and they have made up some knives to match this molding. It was not a stock molding that they carried, although it was very close to a couple. But because we want to reuse this, we had them make a new knife for us to match it exactly. And it'll be doing the trim around the windows and doors. It'll also be doing that same detail is for the top of the baseboards, kind of mounted on the horizontal instead of the vertical. And we'll be using it throughout the house, whereas originally it was just in the front of the house. Kind of they spent the money and the fancy stuff in the front of the house, and then in the back of the house you lost all of that fancier trim detail. But we're going to try to make it more uniform throughout the house. Not originally the way they did it, but it is an original detail. So these are some of the decisions that we got the luxury of making since we're the homeowners. And then we saved all the thresholds, and I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with those. We're not going to have all these threshold transitions. But I'll hold off on that, but you'll see something. I got something planned for the thresholds. Hopefully over the years I will actually do it, and these will be coming back in the house more as an art piece almost. So I got a couple of things in mind that I'd like to do with really all of this wood, all the trim that won't necessarily return as trim will go back into the house in being used in a different way. You can see our stack of doors. We've got over 30 doors cataloged. I went through an inventory and measured everything. They're going back in the house. We're picking which doors we're using where. They'll all get kind of cleaned up, straightened, squared back up to fit newly framed openings just for them. What's interesting is there's like 3 standard sizes for the house. There were the upstairs doors that were all pretty much the same, the second floor doors. There were the downstairs doors on the front of the house, which were these tallish ones in the middle. You see the 2 green ones here and this off-white one. They're just a little taller. They peek out there. So again, they'll be used in the front of, most of these doors will be going back right where they had been used. And they're all in really great shape. Almost none of them had tons of paint. Most of them had been scraped down, either bare, especially upstairs, or with just one thin coat of paint. So they should really look amazing when we rehang them. We are going to have a trick rehanging them because they're so thin. You can see the hinge on them. Try to get this to focus for you. But the hinge is, the doors are only an inch thick. So the hinge itself goes all the way through the doors. And we'd like to find hinges that are not going to go all the way through the doors and be a little bit more tailored for what we're doing. And it's probably going to be more like a cabinet hinge detail that we're going to have to find and put in place. But we got some other things that we saved. This is one of the secret little cabinets that was on the side of the upstairs front bedroom's fireplaces. There's one there. There's the other one here. Oh, the shelf's on the other side. But the guys saved the cabinets entirely so that if we're able to put them in there, it's going to depend on the insulation and everything. But if we're able to put them back right in place where they were, that's ideal. Got some more tongue and groove board that had paint on one side of the house and wallpaper, as you can see, on the other side of the house. These were in the entry vestibule area, and again, I think we're going to try to find a way to bring them back. I've got a little project of like a barn door, and if they're long enough, I'm going to be building the barn door out of these boards because that's where they originally came from. And I think they would look pretty cool. Leave them pretty rough and looking pretty great. Some decorative doors we'll be using. There's some of the more rustic doors and detail pieces back here. We've literally saved everything. All the smaller mantles back there. Lighting's terrible, but it's the basement of the barn, so that's what we get. We get more wainscoting down the side here. These are some doors that we found out in the south shed as we were doing demo and clearing that out. None of them appear to match anything else going on in the house, so I don't know exactly what their deal was, but it's kind of interesting. And we might find use for them, we'll see. But for right now, that's basically it. And oh yeah, we got a garage floor down here too, as a poured concrete floor in the basement. So this has all been very dry. I've actually been running this dehumidifier, keeping it nice and dry down here, keeping everything. Over the winter it'll stay nice and dry, obviously, but in the springtime we want to keep the humidity low so none of this wood gets destroyed. But I got some cleanup to do down here, some more organization after they brought some more material in for us. And I'll get that done or next week or so, and then start working with all of this material and trying to get it prepped to go back in the house. So we haven't been in the house for a little while, so I guess I'll do a quick tour around the outside and inside as well.